Hello and welcome to the Annie Altman Show, the podcast, Season 5. Welcome to the first episode in the Compassion C series. Today, I'm so fortunate to be here with Khari Walker, who is the founder, the head of the 333. They create experiences for people to come and experience being human, being present, being in a compassionate space and community. Thank you so much for being here, Khari.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you so much for thinking of me and having me.
I'm really excited for this to come.
I'm happy to be here. I'm so happy to be here. Let's get going. Let's talk. Yeah. I'm ready. What are we going to talk about?
Let's first go into taking a moment like we did before recording for the people listening too.
Sure. Yeah. So I was just sharing with Annie that I love to take a moment before I dive into any sort of deep conversation. And it's actually a practice that I brought into work. Before we jump into meetings and things, we just take a moment to just bring some presence into the room. And it just feels like it flows better. The day flows better, the meetings flow better, our minds are a little bit aligned. And, our hearts are, when you create that space, your heart and minds tend to send out vibrations and you become sort of one in the room a little bit. So if we could just do that for a moment, I think that would be great and set a beautiful tone for our discussion today. Yeah. All right. So wherever you are, we're here, we're sitting. So we're going to find a comfortable seat, but maybe you're listening to this podcast on a walk or while you're driving. If you're driving, please don't close your eyes and please don't become too relaxed. If you're driving, just focus and just take a little bit of presence on the road, become really focused on the road. But if you happen to be at home, can you find a comfortable seat? And can you make any adjustments to just simply arrive here at this moment? And if you had to be here for the rest of the evening, the rest of the day, can you? So make any adjustments, small little adjustments that you might need to make. And when you feel settled, go ahead and allow the windows of your eyes to fall closed for just a few moments. And we're simply just going to bring some awareness into our breath. Our breath gives us so much, and all that it asks in return is that we occasionally notice it. So can we notice our breath for just a few moments? I invite you to bring your hand up to your heart center. Feel that beating heart. Just for a few rounds of breath, can we inhale a presence and awareness of this present moment, arriving here, and exhaling, letting go of any expectations, any worries, any doubts, any fears. Inhaling awareness of the present moment, and exhaling any expectations, worries, doubts, fears. And on your next exhale, can you just arrive here? Go ahead and open the windows of your eyes. Take it all in. Thank you. Here we are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and thank you for sitting, driving, whatever, in with us, wherever you're listening. Thank you for setting the tone, for inviting this in for this podcast and for this compassion series. I'm really honored to have you on to open up talking about the seat.
Yeah, this has been compassion is something that's I think dear to me, and um, something that we really, really need right now is to be able to uh, be in our practice of compassion. So, there's a lot going on in the world, and I find that all the conversations that I'm having, they all are landing back into this space of compassion. So I felt that it was properly aligned when you reached out for this one. And I know we've been trying to find time to have a conversation for quite some time now, but here we are, and this is the perfect one. So yeah, again, I'm just grateful to be able to have this discussion. Hopefully, we find a little moment that resonates with someone. Yeah.
This was the time for it to happen.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share a little bit about you and about 333 and how that was created. What was the
Sure.
experience of making that experience?
Sure. Yeah, I could talk about it for hours, but I won't. I've always tried to do like a short version of this. Like, what's my most condensed, shortest version of telling this? I don't think I've quite figured it out yet, but let's give it a shot. Um, I was inspired to create the 333, which because I was at the time I was the CEO of a yoga studio here in LA, and when as we started building the experience, I realized that people were coming for more than just the yoga. They were coming religiously to this space because we were providing them with something more than a physical practice. We were providing them with community. We were providing them for a sanctuary, a safe space to come and connect with one another. And so we had this most beautiful, authentic community that was diverse and deeply rooted in the spiritual practice. But then I started planning like Friday nights, and we used to call them First Fridays. And so it was just about music and getting together, and we did all sorts of things together. But and people didn't want to go home. The event started at 6, and then we'd be like midnight, and people were still didn't want to go home. And I'm like, guys, we gotta close up and get here. And I just realized that people were searching for authentic connection, and we found that through a spiritual practice of yoga, but it was providing something so much more than just that. So when the studio had to close, I knew that something had been, I had awareness of something that was much bigger than the physical space that we had. And so I knew I had to keep that going. I just didn't know how. And so I thought I was going to take some time to like figure that out and develop a business plan, and I need investors to get another physical space, and I need all these things. And the community basically was like, so when are we doing our next thing? What's happening now? Now what? We need something. And so I just started saying, well, what am I providing? I'm providing experience. I'm curating experiences for people, and I want to immerse them in experience. So how do I do that? And so I just started curating experiences for people and finding spaces to hold experiences. And at first they were deep rooted in yoga. So it was a lot of yoga experiences. We did something called Deep House, Deep Devotion Yoga, which was a really cool thing. I'm a DJ. I love music. And so I would DJ the yoga class, and we would do meditation. But again, people were coming for the physical practice, but staying for the community connection aspect of it after the practice. And so so then I wanted to super immersive. So then we have a line of elixirs as well, because we don't serve alcohol in our experiences. So we started creating plant-based elixirs using plants to sort of provide a little bit of elevation. So we don't want to intoxicate you, we want to elevate you. That's always what I say. And so we serve those at our experiences. And then it just kept growing from there. We started with our first experience, I think had like 40 people. And then before COVID, we were up to 200 people coming together. And we do many other things. We do things on the beach where we go for hikes together. We do silent discos on the beach. We do silent discos at the top of Griffith Park. And all of it is just creating an immersive experience for people to come and connect and just for 2 hours, let go. And ultimately, I also want to create the alternative for people on a Friday night, the alternative to the other stuff that's out there. So that's where the 333 sort of started to be. And then obviously it's evolved into so much more. We do a lot of private events. We had our actually first retreat in February, just before COVID. We had our first retreat in Topanga. So it was a weekend retreat over 3 days. But we also do curated private experiences for people, and even something as small as their home. They want to like a weekend retreat at their home. We curate that, and we do other big things for big brands and other stuff as well. So we create experiences, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So that's 333, and I don't really have much to say about myself. I don't know. I'm just a fellow lost soul trying to find their way home, like all of us, right? So I'm just on a journey, seeking my truth, and yeah. So I feel blessed to be on this sort of yogic path, if I had to label it anything, and this deep path of deep self-study. And I just try to share that, my wisdom, my inherent wisdom, with as many people as I can through experiences. So I think that's enough.
Thank you. That was very cool to hear about, with the shift of you still keeping the same essence of what you've been doing the whole time.
Yeah. No matter where I am, that's what I try to bring to the mix. I have a quote unquote corporate job as well as my business, my own personal brand that I'm building. But it's so not corporate, but it is. But it's a health and wellness company as well. And I try to bring that still in that space. I try to bring that. And so now I'm leading the team in meditations, and I'm talking to them about, the full moons and all sorts of things, just connecting and creating experience and everything, even to the meetings that we're bringing. I'm trying to create, bring something more to it. So that's where I'm in my happy place, is where I'm creating experiences for people. Yeah.
I really love too that you call them experiences instead of events, and that you have that intentional distinction of what
an event is a moment in time. You come and it's an event. It has a beginning and an end, and an experience is with you forever. There's a shift that happens in an experience, and it resonates with you. And so that's why we don't create events, we create experiences. And I didn't realize that until actually doing them. You know what I mean? I realized that this is not an event. This is something different. And yeah, I learned so much from hearing people talk about them. That's where I learn, and that's where I get inspired when I hear people sharing with me what they felt. And that gives me the inspiration and sort of helps me sort of think about what I'm actually doing. So.
That's interesting too, with the part of you I got to share from before recording too, of being like, no, I don't want to talk about me, or, oh, I don't want to. I'm like, no, that's what we're doing here. I'm gonna, that's part of this. You are the lost soul sharing your specific lost soul's wisdom with this lost soul, and whatever lost souls are tuning in on their own experiences of being souls and bodies.
Yeah.
I
always say that, I always say that we're all beams of light guiding one another home. And that's it. I see us all as one. You know, we're all lost in some respect, right? We're all looking for answers and truth. And if we can, we're meant to help guide one another. And the reason why you connect with people is to give them a little bit and remind them of their inherent wisdom to help them along the way. So,
We're all walking each other home. That's probably the
yeah.
quote I've repeated the most on this whole podcast.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're getting right into the topic here of compassion, both as a practice, and compassion as a practice of remembering oneness, of remembering that we're all lost, and also maybe not lost because we're all lost, and also all on some path that doesn't really have a beginning or an end point.
Yeah. And I think lost, just to give that a little bit, I think context, I think lost has this sort of negative connotation to it. And it's not. It's the best, you have to lose yourself before you can find yourself, right? So that part of this mission that we're on, this purpose of life, it's one of discovery. So we need to have that curious mind that come from that place of discovering and of discovery. And that, I think that's the part of that journey, is like we're on this sort of journey. And I do believe that we have come from someplace else and we were placed here to go through this experience we call life, to eventually arrive back to which we came. So you can frame that however you want to frame it, in heaven or whatever it might be. Like, we don't have to get into that, but I think the story is the same. Like, we were born into this place, we were placed here, and ultimately we're trying to get to where we came, to the place in which we came. So
There would be no being found without being lost.
exactly. So embrace being lost. Embrace it.
In terms of oneness and separation and how to conceptualize those things, I'm feeling like lost and found are sort of a similar, like, part of that feeling of being found or being present to me can be related to that oneness feeling. Whereas that lost feeling or that separation feeling of, I don't really want to be where I am, or this part of me is like over there doing this thing, or my head is in this place, that feels then everything's all fragmented.
Yeah. Isolation. Let's get to oneness by starting on the other end, the opposite, isolation. In science, or basic science, medical science, the condition for disease to occur is when cells begin to isolate themselves, when they forget that they are part of this organism, oneness, and they begin to lose their code of what their purpose is, how they function in the system, and they begin to isolate themselves. And then the other cells begin to see them as foreign and begin attacking them. And then we have disease, inflammation, disease, and all the things that then occur. I think that symptom is the same symptom that we're seeing unfold in every single issue that faces humanity today. So if you look at the racial issues that we're seeing and social justice that we're seeing, it's because we think that we are somehow separate from one another. We've forgotten the sense of oneness which we were born with. And then we are conditioned through systemic practices that some are better than others based on social economic class or pigment of your skin or whatever it might be, and that we're somehow separate from one another. And then there becomes this mindset of scarcity that starts to feed that as well. Same thing with what we're seeing environmentally unfold. We have lost our sense of oneness with the planet. And we think that we're somehow separate from the planet. And we think that somehow the resources that we are sucking from our planet are coming without consequence. So again, the symptoms are the same: isolation, separation, divisiveness. They create the conditions for us to begin this cycle of suffering. And then when we have the cycle of suffering occurring, then you start to have this mind of scarcity, and it becomes the survival of the fittest. And then we have what we have. So I think the solve to that, or the treatment for that, is, of course, this big idea of oneness. But then how do we begin to start to think that? And I think it begins with this idea of, or this practice of compassion. For me, compassion is when you see yourself reflected in someone else. And in order for you to sort of meet that person with compassion, you have to have compassion for yourself first. And once you're able to sort of find that self-compassion for yourself, give yourself grace, look in the mirror and find that light of self-love, compassion, then when you're able to walk through the world, you can begin to practice that with one another. But you also have to have that understanding that, again, we talked about this earlier, that we are all just reflections of one another, guiding each other home. And I always tell people this, when they have a hard time of understanding this idea of we're all reflections of one another, sometimes people don't really understand what that means. Think about this. Think about the people who might be challenging in your life that you have a hard time dealing with. Just for a moment, think that the reason why this person's challenging is because they are reflecting parts of me that I don't like or that I find challenging. And the reason why I say that is because in order for us to know it or to resonate to it or respond to it or react to it, we have to have it within us. Because if we didn't have it within us, there would be no reaction within us because we wouldn't know it. So when you're in the space and you're seeing someone that's just difficult to deal with, the reason why your blood boils and they kind of are uncomfortable and all of that, because they're reminding you or reflecting parts of yourself that you're not comfortable with or you don't like. We all have the good and bad within us. We all have the darkness and light within us. We're all made of that. It's just what we choose to see, what we choose to reflect outward, and that's how people see us. So with that idea, once you're starting to see that people are, if someone is rubbing you the wrong way, and when you start to see yourself in them, if you look hard enough, you start to see yourself in them, I guarantee you will have a bit more compassion for them. Mm. When you start to see them not separate from you, you'll have a bit more compassion for them. So that I try to, and it's a practice. It's not something that is easy. It's
Wait,
not easy.
you don't just, and anytime you feel frustrated, you're not like, wow, this person's reflecting this part of me. I get to integrate into my oneness. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is not easy. Listen, none of this shit is easy. None of this stuff that we talk about, this path of enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, none of it is easy. It's all a practice. And there are going to be times where there are going to be moments where someone does something that you're not going to be able to meet them with compassion. I have a meditation that I use. When something happens and I know that this might be an uncomfortable or might invoke something that's unpleasant, I always take a moment and say, am I reacting or am I responding? And a reaction isn't coming from a place of compassion. It is reacting to circumstances. It's usually driven by our ego. It's usually just that sort of, and sometimes that's necessary. We need to have a defense mechanism. When we're in danger, we need to react. You don't have time to wait a minute. Let me take a moment and take 10 breaths and respond. You know what I mean? There are moments for reaction. Our ego, our mind, we need it to keep us safe in the world. It's not a bad thing. Can you have compassion even for your ego? It's a whole nother topic, a whole nother show, right? But yeah, that's the thing is, am I reacting or am I responding? So a response is coming from that place of compassion because you've taken a moment to see your reflection and you're allowing yourself the space to respond. And sometimes that response may be walking away or engaging further or whatever it might be, but there's a difference between a reaction and a response. And once you start to see that way, compassion sort of feeds through. That's sort of the common practice in all of these things that I've just said. I don't know if I'm getting off topic now. I'm going way, but if that was even your question, I even forgot the question at this point. But
I loved it. And I was definitely feeling the golden rule kept coming up and through. The only thing all religions agree on, treating people how you want to be treated and seeing yourself in them, because then to go back to what you said of compassion beginning with you, that how we're talking to ourselves is how we're talking to other people. And I also want to tag back to what you said. I'm really glad you brought up the scarcity and abundance mentalities,
yeah.
growth mindset, lack mindset. And that feels really connected to this sort of oneness and separation, and also to what you were just talking about of like, I see sort of now I'm lost in my train of like,
yeah, no.
the
This stuff has so many layers.
it
Yeah,
does,
risk factors and response.
that
Yeah,
like often
we could go.
for me that comes
Yeah, go ahead.
from scarcity. Like those all feel very connected. The reaction response, the scarcity mentality, the protection of, well, wait, there's scarcity. Well, wait, what's going on? How do I make sure this human suit is taken care of? And what do I do here? And all of that coming from this place of, well, I'm separate. Like I'm the little cell in the body. I need to just go off and do my own thing and go isolate. And
Yeah,
rather than accepting the reality of being a cell that's part of a whole body, being a human that's part of humanity.
yeah. I mean, we're all just cells in this big thing, right? When you really look at it on the micro scale, right? It's like we're just little cells in this, but together we have a big impact. And we're working from a place of cooperation, inclusion, compassion, acceptance, understanding. We do amazing things.
The sum is greater than the parts.
Yeah, when we are on the other side of that spectrum, we are the most destructive force known. And there's beauty in that story because we always have the ability to come back and be resilient. That's what the resilience of humanity is all about. But we just have to have that awareness of oneness. And we have to have that practice of compassion, because the mindset of scarcity also is because there's a lack of compassion. There's a lack of understanding of oneness, and that we're all in this together and we're all not separate from one another. And somehow, it's, you look at the people who really endure suffering, what we might label as suffering, and may label as living a life of scarcity, meaning that their resources are limited, or maybe obsolete. They may not exist. They may have no resources. But if you watch those people, how they interact with one another, they often share what they have. And sometimes we become connected in oneness within our suffering. So somehow that doesn't translate as well when we are coming from a place of abundance.
It doesn't.
We have an endless resource. It doesn't. It's oftentimes where, when we start to accumulate wealth,
that those people are the least likely to share it, statistically speaking. Most likely to hoard that wealth,
yes,
because that's literally what's happening statistically here. Hello, people with lots of wealth, share it. Hi.
Yeah, and that's not everyone. There are plenty of people who have wealth and share it and give away. And so we're not. I don't want to say that doesn't happen, but it's
statistically, we wouldn't have the wealth disparity that we have if people were all sharing wealth equally. Wouldn't it?
Yeah, and what I meant by that was the beauty of humanity.
All fiery there.
You have less. Yeah. when you have less, somehow something happens and you share more. It's weird. And we see that in communities all throughout. So yeah. Again, losing train of thought, but yeah.
A relevant part of this, of oneness and the practice of it, and what I'm hearing too is the challenges that come up when on the bell curve or the pendulum swinging into this huge extreme of abundance that is perhaps out of touch with reality, because part of reality is moments of lack, or moments of, yes, there's still abundance there, and not everything is there in every single moment all the time. And I wonder how much people then can get really disconnected from that. And then, like, it's the people who have the most dollars who would least notice sharing them, who then are holding on the most tightly, whereas someone else is, sending $10 to a friend on Venmo. And that whole mind shift, like, what's interesting of that too, I'm glad you brought up the other perspective of someone in this extreme position of lack, and how that pathway seems then to lead more towards abundance, towards sharing, towards oneness. Why?
It's subjective. It's just a construct of the mind. It's subjective. I have I shouldn't say lots, but I have extremely wealthy friends, right? Who, you're like, you have no, you have an abundance. You definitely live with an abundance, endless resources. And a lot of them have fear of losing that. Mm-hmm. And so some of them have done a great job of making sure that they have that constant flow. Some of them understands the spiritual side of wealth, and that everything is the constant flow. So energy. You have to, it's all energy. Money is just a currency of energy.
Vibes.
That's right. It's all energy. So when you give it, it comes back, and it's reciprocal. And and some people understand that and can live with that. And but some are so afraid of losing that they then become to operate of this mindset of scarcity instead of this mindset of abundance. And that's the same thing where you can have people who don't have as much, but can still live abundantly and live from this place of abundance, and knowing that the more they give, the more that will come back to them. And it's a spiritual mindset, and a sense of awareness that doesn't matter what you have. It's not attached to the actual physical. It's more of this sort of spiritual awareness that has to be to align with the physical, bank account, if you will, or whatever it might be, whatever you're saying. But I mean, the biggest one that sort of I question is, how can we know without a doubt there's enough food resources in the world where everyone could eat till they couldn't eat anymore, like would be stuffed every day. We know there's enough food, but still we have people every day who die of hunger. Like, we've lost ourselves so much that we can't solve that problem. And I think that where I find hope in all of this is that there does appear to be an awakening of consciousness, of collective consciousness. There are more of these types of conversations happening than I think that have ever happened before. And the first thing, a part of it, is awareness. Once you have awareness, you can begin to have the conversations. The conversations will lead to action, and action will lead to change. So I find hope, and I'm inspired that I'm being asked, and I'm asking others to engage in conversations like this more and more and more and more. And I think that our narrative is starting to change.
More and more people.
So that I have hope. I have hope. I don't think it's in the bag. I don't think it's like, okay, we can sort of cruise into this. I call it a revolution into consciousness, or revolution of consciousness. I don't think we can cruise into that. I think we have to keep our foot on the gas. And those who have the awareness, who have had the sort of awakening, we have to continue to share and have discussions with others. And it's important for us to have discussions with people who don't agree with us. That's really important. And again, that comes back to this place of compassion. Can you have compassion for people who don't agree with us? We need that. We need that to push the conversation, push the action forward. We need that. So, yeah, I wanted to sort of interject a little bit of hope into where we are. I know we have it, but I wanted to bring that into the conversation because I am hopeful. I am extremely hopeful about. I think it's an exciting time to be alive, because I think we're going to experience a shift in consciousness like that has not been experienced in modern day. So I'm just hoping that we can do it and minimize the collateral damage along the way. Because I think that the planet, universe, God, whatever you want to frame it, call it, has deemed that enough is enough, and that change is necessary. It's not an option anymore. It's necessary. So I think that we will continue to be pushed for this great form of change. And I just hope that we start to listen. I hope that the pandemic has given us some greater awareness. I hope that the wildfires that we're experiencing has given us some greater awareness. I hope the murder of George Floyd has given us greater awareness. All of these events that have happened over the last, was March, was it? So the last 6 months, there is no coincidence in this. So when I was having these conversations with the 333 community, we started doing these things called common ground, because I felt like, well, for a moment, I always, in all of our experiences, I actually hire other people, practitioners, to sort of facilitate the experience. I curate behind the scenes and I pull it all together, but I always bring in and collaborate with meditation teachers and yoga teachers and other musicians and other things. The only things that I always felt comfortable doing was playing the music, because I can hide behind the DJ booth and, be cool. But whenever all this started happening, for the first time, I felt called to step up onto the stage alone and facilitate something, because I saw that we were not talking to one another. I saw that we were afraid to have conversations with one another. And so I ended up creating this virtual event called Common Ground, which was really geared about having the tough conversations that we were afraid to have with one another. And I knew that nothing would be accomplished if we all were fearful and ran to our opposite corners and sort of shouted at each other from a distance, or loved one another from a distance. We would never, or it would take much longer for us to get to the change that we want to see. And I knew that enough of us want this change. I think we're I think the sort of unconscious minds or behaviors are outnumbered by the conscious. I think we've won that tally.
I have a question there, because
Sure.
You said you have hope in humanity, but I just heard with you having faith, you're having a knowing in humanity to say the scale has
100%.
tipped in some way, whatever that means, whatever tipping point of people who are open, interested in these kinds of conversations, these practices, this podcast episode of this one little, that we're doing this, talking about these things, and there's lots of podcasts and people who are inching towards whatever sense of a more compassionate world. And it's interesting too to hear the part you said about, for again, that balance and that oneness, meaning all of the things. Part of oneness is isolation, and you're stepping out alone being part of this. And then also, I love the stepping out alone to encourage connection and togetherness, and the compassion too, yourself, like you were to do something outside of your comfort zone, like you were saying, of, oh, I can hide in the DJ booth.
Yeah. For me, I just didn't, and this is again another conversation, but I felt that I didn't have permission. I knew I had something I wanted to say and share. I knew that I wanted to share the practice of meditation with people. I knew I wanted to share wisdom, my inherent wisdom, wherever that's coming from, because it doesn't belong to me. It's from, if it, at the very least, it belongs to my life experiences that have become before me, right? Again, another conversation, but it doesn't belong to me. This wisdom was inherent. It's been a gift, and so I must share that. And I felt for the first time I had the permission to do that from wherever, because it resonated differently for me. And maybe it was because I'm a Black man living in this country. Maybe it was that resonated. I don't know. It just felt different. And it felt like it was the time to speak up. And so I said, I have to create a container for these types of conversations And it has to be a sacred space that feels safe for people to share and speak openly and be vulnerable in these conversations. And the way people showed up, I was blown away, because we had people who were like from all different walks of life, all age groups, all races. And what we discovered quickly was that we were all feeling the same things, the same emotions, just from different experiences and different points of view. So can we discuss and have a discussion on what fear looks like for me and what fear looks like for you? Can you have compassion for where I'm coming from? Can you see me and hear me and have that resonate with you? And to know that, again, we have this commonality of what we're feeling. Fear is fear. Anger is anger. Sadness is sadness. Doesn't matter how you got there. That feeling that you sit with is the same. And so we were beginning to have these conversations, but each conversation always led back to a discussion around compassion. It always led back to some sort of compassion exercise that I did with the group or something, or some exercise around compassion. And that's what was missing or was lacking from the discussion. And so for me, it's like, it's all tied back to the same. How do we get back to a place? And the reason why, and to tie it back to what we were talking about, the reason why I feel hopeful and I have faith in humanity is because until now, we've survived. We've made it. So I led a meditation, and this reminds me of this. I led a meditation a few weeks ago, and I'm going to try not to forget it. And actually, maybe I'll pull it up. But it reminded me of, basically, it was tapping back into thinking about what it takes for us to exist. How many generations had to come before us? How many fathers, mothers, grandparents, how far back generations our ancestors have to go for us to exist here in this moment? And when you think about those sheer numbers of how many great-grandparents, grandparents you've had, then think about how many struggles they had to overcome, how much pain they had to endure, how many times they had to push through to make it, to survive, those stories of survival. And then think about the stories, how many love stories are in that as well. So this is just another one of those things. So I have faith in humanity because until now, humanity hasn't let us down. And sometimes it's really ugly. It's a story of struggle. It's a story of pain. But there's also a lot of love. So
there is, and how to love the pain and love the struggle, compassion for fear and anger and these things that we've labeled as ugly and bad and wrong, and how to bring that into those, like you're saying, those tough conversations where I know for me, if the conversation feels challenging, it is easier. It's to go into that, and I'll say, oh, it's human nature, which is all lectury, of to go more into that reactive space, or to shut down, to isolate, to be like, no, this is my fear, this is my anger, that's different from that person's, like, oh, or like, I can't share it with them, that's going to be a burden on them, or any of these things that are lacking compassion, or lacking whatever that feeling is of it's okay, whatever it is. And like you're saying too, well, we're still here, we're here now,
yeah. But yeah, that to me put it all into context and framework in a way that I hadn't thought about it. Think about all of the stories before my story. And we've always made it. We've always figured it out. So I think we have to have faith in that. So yeah, so I think it's an exciting time to be alive. And I think we're lucky to be here now. So
getting to practice that remembering and reconnecting to that, okay, compassion for fear, compassion for anger, okay, compassion for the knowing that my body has more knowledge in it than I have any idea of, because of all of these experiences that happened before it.
Absolutely.
Which again, for separateness and oneness of, we're all, it can be easy, I feel like, to forget and to feel isolated, to feel separate, to feel like, okay, well, it was just these two humans who had me, and then it's me, I'm here, boom, rather than, yeah, you're bringing up that really got me too, of all the love stories that are in each of us, for us to have come and to be here.
And that resonates with you. And every time I share that meditation, it, tears are shed. I tear up every time I speak about it, and it resonates with us because the epigenetics within us, those love stories are resonating. Those stories of struggle and coming through and coming out, they're resonating with us. They're firing off. They're causing a response in us because they're a part of us. They're part of us. So
practice with compassion to remember those parts and acknowledge them and celebrate them.
Yeah.
Which can, when the world is burning, when all of these things are happening, when people are getting shot, when people are fighting about masks, about whether or not Black Lives Matter, like all of these things, then to come back to, okay, I'm in my silent meditation practice, or I'm in my seated thing, or I'm in my practice of curating an experience, of doing something to, like you said, keep your foot on the gas pedal.
Yeah.
Which part of me, I had an ego thing that was like, no, we have to rest and relax and not force things. And also, we do need to keep going.
Yeah, I think now is not a time to sort of, now is a time to like do the work and sort of not lose sight of the work, and let's not get comfortable after a few sort of demonstrations and protests, and even if this election, let's see what happens on November 4th, how we're all practicing compassion and what that will need to look like, because we'll need it no matter what happens, no matter who wins. We need the practice of compassion, but can we, at the end of the day, can we still going to have work to do. So no matter what happens, it's not going to end. It's not about one election. It's not about one protest, or it's not about one, beating one, case of police brutality or whatever. It is about keeping your foot on the gas until there is the change that we want to see becomes the reality that we want to see. And that's when I say keep our foot on the gas. We have to. And another thing that's really hopeful is that the generation behind us seems to be more conscious. Yeah, and so I think that's super exciting. But we have to continue to share our wisdom and educate them and make sure we guide that along the way, and they have to be open to that. So there's a lot of variables still there, but this idea of divisiveness and separatism and all those things like that does not seem to resonate with them. The idea of oneness and compassion seems to be an easier sell to that generation. So that's also hopeful, and it's a bit of light in the end of the tunnel, I think.
A point of coasting, a point of being and existing, and okay, to extend this metaphor, a point where we're not using gas anymore, and we are using sustainable fuels and living in one.
Keep your foot on the pedal.
with the world, with this planet, which is another, I feel, shift we're seeing of how people from different generations talk about the environment and talk about humans' impact on the environment.
Absolutely.
And remembering that we're part of it, and remembering to, I feel a shift in the conversation from this sort of separateness with nature and this like, well, how do we use it and make it work for us to we're all on this planet, and if we destroy it, there's no planet B, quote. And then people will be like, oh, well, Mars or Venus, and also there's one Earth.
Yeah. Somehow we think that we own it. We own this place.
Yes. It's again
at the very, I mean, I think we are, I don't know. I have some conflict in myself of how I approach this, because I do believe that we're placed here from someplace else, right? I believe that, I think. But I also know that we're connected to it. But so at the very best, we're guests. Like, we're guests at either we're one with the planet and we came from the planet. Okay, that's the story. That should be an easier one for us to want to take care of it, that we're one with it. But at the very best, we're a guest. So we should also behave as guests and look after, because without this world, without this habitat, we would not survive. We know that. So again, I hate to say it, the generations before us seem to have a harder time with that. Again, the younger generation seems to be a bit more environmentally conscious, and consciousness is a cool thing, I think, and so there's hope in that. But we also have to get people into positions of power that also have visions for the future that we want to be our reality. And we have to vote that way, use our power to vote in that way. So
consciousness is becoming cool, and so is compassion, and so is voting, please. and showing up
I had to plug it in there
activism
somehow.
In your own way, for however that is for different people.
Yeah.
Which again is this symbiosis, if everyone was, let's say, someone's like, I want to work at a polling booth on election day. If everyone wanted to do that, that wouldn't work. We need people to be doing different parts and different things. If everyone was like, I'm going to teach meditation,
yeah,
that wouldn't work either.
Yeah, and that even goes into when everything was going on, I was like, should I be in the streets protesting? I feels like I should be out there protesting. And I was like, maybe not. maybe is that the only way to show up and make my voice heard and make my influence heard? No. There are other ways of doing that as well. So to your point is there's so many ways to do it. The only thing that we can't afford to do is to remain silent and to fall into a place of complacency, which leads us, or fear that leads us into a place of not taking action. So figure out how you can be effective and do it. Get out there, and if it's an electric car or a gas car or whatever it is, get in it and go.
Is most available to people right now.
Yeah, and go in the direction that you want to see. Go in that direction. As long as you're headed in that direction.
Practice. Do that. Experience being a human.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'm curious too, how much resistance to doing the work, like Byron Katie, the work, or the Jungian, whatever, like all of these things, and to go into the practice. Again, with us all having more of the same feelings and different ones, I find that it's fear often, and it's isolation, and it's sadness, and these things that are what comes up to bring resistance to doing the practice of like, oh, well, I'm not going to do it right. I'm going to do it wrong. Or, oh, it's not actually going to do anything if I do this. Or, you know, what's the point of this podcast anyways, or this episode, or what's the point of doing this experience or this event, not like this, setting the stage for something.
Yeah.
That then having compassion for the practice to say, well, I'm here, I'm showing up, I'm doing it, I remember oneness one more time than I forget about it.
Yeah, I think once something resonates with you, again, it's a part of you, and eventually you return back to it. So I use yoga as an example. Once you have that practice on your mat and that shift occurs, you might fall out of practice. You might skip a couple of times. You may go a few months without practicing, especially in a time like now where all the yoga studios are closed, and I struggle with a home practice. I have that issue. But sometimes you have to have that pause or that break away from the practice to remind you of why you practice. So when you get out of practice, that's okay. Have compassion in that, because know that that's also necessary to remind you of why you practice.
It's part of the practice.
That's right. That's right. So it's just like anything. If you play a sport or something, you start to get rusty, you realize, I got to start practicing more. I got to practice more. So if you fall out of practice, if you have a bad day and you realize I really wasn't the most compassionate today, or I didn't handle that situation in particularly with the most compassion, I could have done that differently. At least you have that awareness, right?
Which is still awareness of being aware of being unaware.
Yes.
Aware that you were compassionate.
Yeah. Love yourself for having that awareness, and return back to that practice tomorrow, or give it a day and call that person and have another conversation with them, or whatever it might be. But return back to the practice.
Any examples, or would you give a little, like, I'd be curious what that self-talk conversation is like for you, between you and you.
I tell this story, and I tell this story because it's one that's so superficial. It's so superficial. It reminds me, it kicks me off of my like spiritual high horse that I still have attachments to this material world. So that's why I end up telling this story a lot, or not a lot, but I've told this story several times. So one of the things that, as I worked in my practice of self-study, the idea is to not be attached and to not be, sort of attached to this material world and to material things. But one thing that I struggle with is I'm a car guy. I like cars. I like sports cars. I like fast, expensive cars. And I don't spend money on jewelry, or I don't do things like that, but I do like splurge on cars. So anyway, there was a car that I particularly wanted, and I finally was like, I'm gonna get this car for myself. I wanted this car. It's a dream car of mine. I'm gonna get it. I got the car, had to wait 6 months for it to arrive. It arrived, made it for me in the factory in Germany, made it for me. It arrived. I had to drive up to the Bay Area to get it, fly up there to get it, and then drive it back home. And I got it back home, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have this car. Then I was afraid to drive it because I was afraid to like scratch it, or the roads in LA are horrible and I'm bumping everything and every pothole is, and I was like, oh, I don't want to drive it. And so I, I felt nervous driving it. And it was so weird. And I was like, why am I like having this feeling about it? So that was like the first few months of having the car. Then one day I was like, this is silly. Why am I like, I can't, like, I'm not enjoying this. This is silly. So I decided I'm going to go today. I'm going to get the car washed. And from this day forward, I'm going to enjoy this car and I'm going to drive it. I'm going to take it out to the PCH and go up in the canyons like I used to do, and how I dreamt of what I would do once I had this car. So I pull out of my house and I call the car wash detail guy. I'm like, I'm coming over to get the car detailed, and da-da-da-da. Drive out, pull out into the traffic light right in front of my building. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, splash into the back of the car. And first, I reacted. Car accidents are traumatic. You're like, what happened? What's going on? Am I okay? What's happening? And then all of a sudden, there was a shift. And once I realized I was okay, I knew I was safe, I thought, okay, now I have to respond or react to this situation. What do I do now? And as the emotion starts to flood of me getting upset, me getting sad, all the things happening, I said to myself, am I reacting or am I responding? And it was the first time that I remember that I had that sort of shift awareness in that moment. That wasn't something that was small and very sort of thing, because I needed to react. I needed to do something because this had just happened, and on a busy street in LA. And I remember saying to myself, before I got out of this car, this person has just made a horrible mistake. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know if they were texting and driving, but this person, it was like, clearly this is their fault. Like, I was stopped, like, so this person has made a horrible mistake. If I had just done this, how would I want this person to respond to me? I shocked myself because I was like, who is this person? What is happening? And I got out of the car, and people had seen what happened. They came up to me and was like, they were more upset than I was. Man, I can't believe this and that. And I'm like, I don't even know you. Like, no, you. Like, and so the guy, it was this young guy, got out of the car, and he was just sort of like, I'm so sorry. He spoke English, but he was from, can't remember where he was from, but I think he was from the Netherlands or something. And it wasn't even his car. It was his brother's car. He was here visiting. And in that moment, I started to laugh because I also had the awareness to say, huh, the universe, God, whoever, really has a sense of humor, because I've had this car for 6 months, barely driven it. The moment I decide that I'm gonna not be attached to it and not and get out there and just drive it and enjoy it, this happens to force me to no longer be attached to it any longer. So I just laughed, and I was able to meet this guy and just say, hey, he's like, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. It was a mistake. And 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 I look at the car and I'm like, oh wow. The car was in the shop. I thought it was going to be total, but it was in the shop for 6 months. So for now, for
Another
6
6 months.
months, but this 6 months I didn't have the car, right? So 6 months of having it, not enjoying it, then 6 months of not having it.
And first 6 months of waiting, first 6 months of waiting for
Yeah,
it.
and then 6 months, right? Exactly. So anyway, it was the first time that I saw that happening. And this again is something superficial. At the end of the day, of course, it's just a car, it doesn't matter. But you have emotional attachments to things, right? So there were many lessons and layers to this lesson. But I was able to have a conversation with this guy. I ended up having an injured shoulder from it and all the stuff that I'm still dealing with. But for the most part, I was good. And all I had was this sort of incident or this moment to show up and meet someone who was in a state of suffering with compassion. And it completely changed the whole dynamic, because if I had met that and reacted to him and been upset, he might have gotten upset, or it definitely wouldn't have done anything to change the situation. So I just saw that, and that was a time where it was like, and it ended up becoming frustrating down the road, because I have to deal with, getting it fixed and paying for that and doing all that stuff. And he didn't have great insurance and all these things. I probably would, if I had known all of that, I probably would have been more. But it was the first time where I saw that shift happening, and I saw the difference of taking that moment of like, am I reacting or am I responding? And I'm choosing to respond. So how can I meet this moment with compassion? So, and you could tell he was expecting like a fight almost. He was expecting like, this is gonna not be great kind of thing. So that's an example of a time where I sort of felt that. And now it's, again, it's a practice. I can't say that I'm always going to show up that way. I have some other circumstances that have challenged me from business. I have a business relationship that I find challenging. And that one's been challenging to get to that place of compassion. But so I return back to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a fun story. I would love to hear that guy's perspective of what happened and what shift went for him too, of fuck, I just hit this fancy car, to fuck, this person is being calm to me and actually curious to talk, and also coming with the compassion to say, this was a mistake, to say, I know you were doing your best. I know you weren't out here purposely wanting to, and for you to see the sense of humor of it, of like, this is ridiculous. This is hilarious timing in the whole situation. Also, the part of it, which is, you had suffering in that situation too. Yeah, it's just a car, it's just a thing, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so was that guy's car just a car, and his stuff and his, like, you also had to somehow acknowledge your suffering, and also it's almost as if being compassionate with it and being compassionate with him helped to minimize your suffering or helped to?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
It is a, yeah, it's not a selfless act.
Altruism is totally selfish. I say this one all the time.
No, it's totally selfish. It's selfish. Like,
Because
it's
it feels
selfish.
good.
It feels good. It feels good to meet a moment and to touch into what he felt. I felt, I'm an empathic person anyway, but I felt in that moment him sort of being expected to kind of have to come up to here. But when you're met here, the relief come to him. You know what I mean? I felt that sort of, and it validated that. And for you, for me, it also, it minimized that. Sort of seeing his response sort of gave me the I don't know, reward of also allowing myself to sort of just let this situation sort of be, right? And because I would have probably become more injured, because when moments of trauma and all these things, cortisol and all those things that rush to your body, they cause, you know, they can sustain injury and different things. So if you're able to sort of manage that and manage some of those stress hormones, the benefits are there for you as well. So yeah, it was also for me. Yeah, I mean, they always revolve around cars. I had a car stolen as well. Before that, actually, a couple months before that, I had a car. I just realized that I had a car stolen. It wasn't my car. It was my friend's car, who I was borrowing while he was out of town, and it was stolen from my building, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Also, then like with this other guy and it being his friend's car, and also then
Yeah, it was just weird.
cars. What a
Yeah.
goofy sense of humor for.
Yeah, I was like, clearly I'm being taught something. So again, then in seeing yourself, it's like, okay, when you get to this place of compassion, and you're able to sort of just be present in the moment, the circumstance of the moment, can you have the awareness to be able to see the lesson in it? And every time, if I sit with it enough and meditate on enough, I see the lesson very clear.
The gift of it, the presence of sometimes
Yeah,
it's more
yeah,
challenging. You're taking more time to be like, well, okay, I'm still sitting with this one. What was the thing happening for me, through me here?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate too your interest in like, this is to go to compassion for the ego. You're allowed to like cars. You're allowed to have a preference, have a thing that brings you joy. I'm reminding myself and reminding people listening of that compassion for that.
Yeah.
I find that I like that part of people who embrace their whole being a paradoxical human.
I learned that, or I shouldn't say I learned that, but I was reminded of this, one of my yoga teachers and sort of creative partners. I create things with her as well. She does a really great workshop around, her name is Shayna Healer. She does great, well-known yoga teacher here in LA. She does a workshop around this idea of abundance and mindset of abundance and the flow or the spirituality around abundance and money and economics and materialist possession. And you're absolutely right. Somehow we've made up in our minds that we're on these spiritual paths, that we're not allowed to have nice things. And that's this weird idea, or we're not allowed to like expensive things or have these things. And that's not the point. The point of that is to not be attached to them. And when you see everything is borrowed, and I have another teacher named Danielle Karuna, ILA teacher in yoga, who reminded me of this lesson, is that nothing belongs to us. Nothing. It's all temporary and it's all borrowed. So if you can have these things and see, okay, and that was my lesson in that car thing, was like, okay, I have this car, enjoy it, because it will be also, it's borrowed. It's gonna go be, you're gonna move on from it in some way. Even the relationships in our lives, even in our loves in our lives, it's borrowed time, it's temporary. So be present with it. Have as many of those experiences with it, because those stay with you forever. So be present in it, enjoy those things, have them. It's okay to have them. But if you start to have fear about losing them, then you're not ready to possess them. That's the lesson in it. If you're afraid of losing it, then you're not ready to possess it. You have more work to do.
There's some Yoda quote along the lines of, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
Yeah.
So like grasping versus having that.
Which
is again a continual practice, because part of it is we get so excited about things or with that passion, and having compassion for that passion that let me go in this way, or let me do this, let me create the 3-3-3, let me start this thing.
I'm being reminded of a big lesson as we're having this conversation.
Please share.
Of one of my, I might have to sit with that one a little bit more, but I might have to sit with that one. But it's around this idea of discovering a bit more of some of the fears that I have, and some of the fears I have of sort of stepping into the next chapter of my life. And it reminded me of some work that I have to do of like not being attached to the result, being willing to let it go. And when I'm able to let it go, it will flow and return into this. So I've been challenged with that over the last few weeks. And thank you for that, reminding me of that, resonating with me with that, because I have now been reminded of that. And no coincidence that today is a new moon for us. So it's the perfect time to let go of this old way of thinking. So thank you for that. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And thank you.
Sorry, the lighting in here has gotten weird because it's the sun setting. So the lighting is changing with the sun.
I like it. I like the purple. And I like that new moon intention and reminder. And I feel that one for me too, in that lesson of continuing to, fear is in the car, anger, sadness, they're all in the car. They can all come forward into this new chapter, and they're going to, because it's still me, it's still you there.
But the life of non-attachment,
including being unattached to, I have to practice non-attachment and this is what I do and who I am.
Being attached to the practice is what most yogis run around life experiencing. They're not, without the physical practice, they are like, I'm not, it's like, you can't be attached to that either.
Continually practicing and practicing the practices.
Yes.
And it's so fun.
It is, right? It's a fun journey.
It is. It's definitely, it's all of the things. It's one. So it is, all of the things are part of the journey. And I do notice that the more compassion I bring to it, then like you're saying about what you give and what you're receiving and how things end up flowing, that the love you take is equal to the love you make. The you in that story of being compassionate to someone who accidentally rear-ended you, then in that, even in that specific interaction, changed the compassion that came back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And again,
like you got this experience in this story that you said you shared before, and that,
yeah,
in fact, I'm very grateful for that experience and getting to experience the feeling of it and hear and learn from this really tangible embodied thing of this spiritual and out of body experiential stuff.
That's what I was going to say. It resonates with me, not because of the circumstance, but because of in that moment, I became the watcher, right? I became the watcher, and I was separate from my mind and body in that moment. And it's one of the times where I vividly remember that sort of having that awareness of the different entities of myself and creating that space. So yeah, that was just, and for that time, it was like, I saw the work transpiring into life. I saw myself in practice, and
in real time, in the present.
In real time, yeah, in real time, in presence. So, yeah.
Maybe that guy will come to one of the future 333 experiences. That'd be a cool full circle.
I wonder. I don't know.
You're like, Annie.
Still dealing with that.
Annie, come on.
Yeah.
So where can people find, I will link all your stuff in the description. Can you say where they can find you and learn more about the experiences that you are offering?
Yeah. So the 333.life. So the THE 333 .life is our website. That's also our Instagram handle. We're not doing a lot of experiences right now because of COVID and all of those things and the pandemic, and I'm approaching that with such grace because I know a lot of people are doing experiences now, and they're doing stuff outside, and a lot of our stuff is outside. So I'm being asked, why aren't we doing stuff? And it's because I really believe that this is a time for reflection, pause. And I would have hoped that we could just return back to business as usual. But I don't believe that that's the case. So we will return to doing things soon, hopefully, but when the time is right. And I don't feel like the time is right now. And that's hard because I believe that people need connection. I don't believe that isolating in your house is the answer to what we're seeing happen. So, but at the same time, maybe the connection that we need right now is with ourselves. So maybe that connection is about going in and reminding yourself of your purpose. So when time comes where we can be together again, we can do that with greater intention. So
bring our practice.
I hope that we can do, I hope that we can do something quite amazing soon. I'm also using this time to think of new ideas and new concepts. And we'll bring back some of the old ones that were really popular. But for now, we're just sort of, we're sort of taking the time to reflect. So,
which is again part of the practice to bring into future practices.
Yeah, it's I can't see it any other way. I try because I miss it. I want to do stuff, but it's just like, we're not, we're still in the practice of reflection. So,
And if it doesn't feel right, then what fun would it be? If we recorded this
yeah,
podcast 6 months ago when it wasn't a hell yes, that I don't want to
yeah,
record that. That's not a fun podcast to do.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see where it goes, when it goes. And I'm really excited to there's something I feel very inspired by in your conviction to say that it's okay to rest and to pause,
Yes.
and that yes, keep your foot on the pedal, and also that doesn't mean in all areas and doing all of the things in the exact same ways that you used to.
Mm-hmm. I don't, yeah, I don't, I think self-study and reflection, I don't even know if I would consider that rest. I think that's some of the, I think that's
Thank
some
you
of
for that.
that's some of the, that's some of the most challenging work that you can do, is to sit with yourself.
The home practice,
That's
it's
why
a really different practice.
that's why people, yeah, that's why people are like, we got to get out and we got to do stuff and we need to do these things. And just because you put a spiritual label on them, does that really mean that, you know, it's not a distraction from the real work that needs to happen? So, yeah.
It's an important reminder too.
Yeah, that self-study, that's the hardest, that's the hardest stuff to do. That's why most of us avoid it, because it's so tough. So tough. But I wanna invite everyone to a practice. And that practice is one of true reflection, which will result in deep, deep, deep compassion. And that's a practice of eye gazing. And have you ever eye gazed before? Yeah. So it's quite simple, but I invite you to do that with a loved one, a stranger. You can even do it with yourself in the mirror. But sit and in pretty close proximity. So mind all of the regulations or whatever, is to do it with someone in your family or whatever, however you might want to do it. But sit together on the same level in close proximity and set a timer for 5 minutes at least. You can go longer, you can do 10 if you really want to go. But if it's your first time, 5 minutes is probably good. And simply take a few moments to take a few breaths together. Tune in, become present in the moment, and then simply sit and gaze at each other's eye. Gaze into each other's eyes. Not breaking away, not looking away. And I guarantee you it will be a life-altering experience, especially if you haven't done it for the first ever before. And don't look away until that timer goes off. And whatever comes up, lean into it, embrace it. But eventually, you will see yourself in that person. Once you get past all of the uncomfortableness and the weirdness and the whatever, eventually, you will see yourself in that person. And then you will understand compassion. So I invite you guys to all to do that. Yeah, it's also a powerful practice.
Very powerful. I really appreciate you sharing that here and encouraging people to do it and to practice.
Yeah.
And to bring it again full circle to seeing yourself in someone else.
Yeah. That's what it's all about. Like, it is. That's so what it's all about.
It is. We're hearing ourselves in the other person, the person listening,
Yeah.
hearing themselves and what we're saying.
Yeah.
Little pieces of it are, oh, well, that's not me. Well, so then this is me. And
Yeah.
who's me anyways? Thank you for the eye gazing reminder.
Yeah.
Thank you for the things that you've created and share and for coming on. Thank you for opening the podcast with a meditation.
My pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me and creating this beautiful platform for sharing and connecting people. This is important work that you're doing. It's so important for us to find ways to connect with one another and share our wisdom and just talk, have conversation. One of the beautiful things about the podcast is it's brought that back, this idea of satsang, which is when people used to gather and have conversation and share stories and share wisdom with one another. This is an ancient practice. And I think podcasts have reinvented that in a cool new way. So thank you for creating this and having the drive and listening to whatever had to move through you for you to take the leap to create something new, because it's not easy to create something like this. I know that. So acknowledge that in yourself. And I thank you for creating it for us.
Thank you. Wow. I'm just feeling a mush of like goosebump and warm. And thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It would not be happening without you, without people coming on and being open to have those conversations and to have the compassion to slow down and to talk through it and say, okay, we're both humans here talking.
Yeah, that's right.
And for pointing out the technology, again, coming full circle and being a tool that can increase compassion.
Absolutely.
As much as decrease.
It's a beautiful tool, this computer box thing, the internet thing that we do. It's beautiful. But how, like any tool, it's how you use it. Are you building or are you destroying? The same tools you use to build a house are the same tools you use to destroy a house. So.
Ooh, that metaphor. Ooh, that metaphor. Wow. I'm gonna be experiencing that one for a little bit after this recording.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much for coming and sharing. I'm really excited for our next episode already.
Thank you.
Whenever that may be.
Yeah, anytime. This was a pleasure. So anytime. I would love to. And I hope to see you at a 333 event when you're back stateside.
Yes, I'm excited to come to an event. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Much love to each and every one of you.
Thank you so much all for tuning in. And thanks for being you.